This is Nikhil Sharma. I'm excited to be joined by Ollie Brockett for LowKickMMA. Tonight, we're going to be breaking down Dana White Contender Series Week 8. Hey, Ollie, I'm very excited to get started on this card. Let's get right into it with the main event. Begosso versus Basharat. Who do you got on that one?
It's a very interesting one. It's bantamweights again, and I think nowadays, especially in the UFC, with a lot of fans, the bantamweight division and lightweight division are head and head. I think it's got a lot of energy, a lot of pack for punch. But in this one, Fareed was supposed to fight on week one of the Dana White Contender Series. He showed up, he made weight, he made his show money, but the UFC are like, nah, you're not getting into the UFC. I know your brother's there, but you've got to fight, you've got to prove your worth to come into this promotion. And they've gave him one in Alan Begosso, which is going to be a tough test. And like I said, he's trying to join his brother Havid, who's also undefeated. Crazy story about them. Coming from Afghanistan, moving to England as refugees, and now both of them nearly in the UFC. You've seen the Bonfim brothers last weekend making it, and the Diaz brothers from last night in UFC 279. Maybe it's the time with the brothers. Maybe that's what we need. But going into the matchup, it's not going to be a fairy tale ending for Basharat, because Begosso is a power puncher. 6 of his 7 wins come in the first round. He also poses a submission threat, and he's also got a very good kickboxing background. However, he's liable to be taken down, which Basharat is very good. He's got his brother's tempo, take down, hold your weight on the ground, do damage, get up on the feet, and outpoint you with your kicks. And I think that's what Basharat's going to do, but he's got to be careful coming into these takedowns, because Begosso does have a really nice guillotine defense when coming in on those double legs. So even though it's going to be a close fight, and both guys are very skilled mixed martial artists, I see Fareed using his movement, his kicks to generate openings, and his wrestling would just tire out Begosso. And I think he'll get a decision victory. And if it's dominant enough, he'll join his brother in the UFC.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there, Ollie. I feel like Fareed is more proficient at grappling and submission abilities, whereas Begosso is a more all-rounded fighter compared to Fareed. I feel like the key for him would be to make sure that his knockout power is reduced as low as he possibly can, which would be by using his wrestling and tiring him out early in the fight. So in the later rounds, maybe he can lock in another one of those rear naked chokes. He has so many of them in his career, and then make his way into it. Let's go to the next fight now. Aliskerov versus Marius. What do you make of that one, Ollie?
It's going to be an interesting one. These are the biggest guys on the card. And this one you get in Mario Sousa, who's making his 3rd Dana White Contender Series appearance in nearly 2 years. He's won one decision in his first time out, but again, Dana White wasn't impressed enough. But then he came back and he took a loss. And he's got another shot now, but he's got it against a nightmare matchup. And, we saw last night in Chimaev, these Dagestani wrestlers aren't no joke. And he's going against this guy. And speaking of Chimaev, this guy actually fought Chimaev in his up-and-coming pro career, where Chimaev was able to knock him out. But that does not mean he is any less dangerous. As he's fought Chimaev, he's fought other very experienced guys. He's also got, he's also a world champion in Sambo, multiple-time world champion. He's got powerful ground and pound. He is a great submission threat. And his only loss when fighting Chimaev, it came from being a sloppy striker. So you look at Sousa, and if he has any benefit in this fight, it is the fact that he's more the skilled striker, and he's got a bit of a power advantage with his hands. But I just don't see Aliskerov giving up this opportunity. He's just too well-rounded. And I see a stoppage victory on a ground and pound. I really do. I don't see anything much past that.
Yeah, you feel like Aliskerov would go in, use his wrestling, get the fight to the ground, and just lay it onto him and get it TKO win or something like that. Saw what the Chechen Monteith Chimaev did last night in 90 seconds. Not 90 seconds, but like something. It felt like 90 seconds, if not shorter. Holland did well, but anyway, yeah, it would be interesting when you lose to someone like Chimaev. Are you? I think you can almost make a case that he hasn't really had that big loss yet. You know, it's like it makes sense. It's Chimaev. So it'll be very interesting to see how that one goes, because I do feel like Felipe has some advantages too. Mario is 6'5". He has a bigger reach advantage with that, which is of 5 inches. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out at middleweight. Even the champion, Israel Adesanya, is in that one. But like you said, if Mario can't get to striking, he can't use his knockout power or any of his abilities. So he will be in risk there. Now let's go on to the next fight of Malik. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to quickly say, to add on to that shortly, just considering all the other mental hurdles Sousa has to overcome. As I said, like it's his third appearance on Dana White Contender Series. Surely there's some sort of doubt embedded in your head. So he's also got to get over those hurdles, and he's also got to go over the hurdle of a great wrestler. And unless he's been training on it, it's going to be difficult for him.
Yeah, 100% agree. He probably has a mission and a statement to make now. So let's get on to the next fight of Malik Lewis versus Trevor Peek at 155 pounds. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, Trevor Peek is actually coming off a win, against a former UFC fighter in Kama Worthy. The knockout fiend Trevor Peek, he's getting his shot on the Contender Series against a very long and tricky opponent in Malik Lewis. And both fighters coming to this fight with an undefeated record, so someone's O has got to go. However, you look at this bout, as I said, Lewis has got the longer frame. He's got good front kicks to the body, like we saw with Garn against Tuivasa. Very, very sharp, snappy kicks to the sternum. However, there's just so much value here for Peek. Even though stylistically and matchup wise, Lewis has probably got the advantage with his length and his power and a bit of good wrestling from himself. But Peek, he only needs one hit to knock you out. 5 first-round knockouts, great straight punches. He's got powerful kicks as well, which no one really expects from him. He's very quick on the feet. So for Peek to win this fight, I think he needs to move around the cage. He doesn't need to he needs to try and not get inside his own head. That's what I'm trying to say. Because he spoke about that in interviews, about getting in your own head, because he knocks people out early, and you don't want to be worried about, oh God, I'm not getting the finish. He just needs to move around the cage, get used to the area he's working with, see what Lewis would be trying to do, see if he shoots any takedowns, and then pounce on him, because he's got the quick feet to close that range and get inside that gap and do some work. And as I said, if he only needs one punch to do it, if he's worked on his striking, I don't think he needs to worry about the wrestling. All he needs to do on the ground is create scrambles and trying to get up. And that's the type of fighter he is. So Lewis, even though he's the longer guy and got the better wrestling, and it wouldn't be a shock if he won. I just think Peek, his power, man, if he can back it up with a bit of talk, Dana's going to love him.
Yeah, great points there. Because Trevor Peek, when you look at his resume, it feels like another one of those Chimaev situations coming up. The guy has 6 fights, and all 6 of them he won by knockout. So let's see if he'll maintain his 100% finish rate. But one thing that is for sure is that all that each of these guys would have on the record is going to come in a spectacular fashion. I feel like for Lewis, he has shown more versatility in his game. He got a submission win in his last outing, which I'm not sure how many people were expecting from him. Even though he's good at grappling, he likes to do that. I wonder what mentality he'd be going into inside the octagon with, because if he is there to entertain the fans and he's thinking, okay, I got to put on a show, he might get excited and brawl it out with Peek, which is not a good idea. So if he sticks to his game plan, which I'm guessing would be take the fight to the ground, just tire Peek out, maybe wait for the later rounds to come and be patient with that. Very interesting to see how that one goes, and also very entertaining. Now, before we move on to the next fight, would you like to add anything else, Ollie?
Uh, I, I just think, as you said, in Malik's last fight, he shot for that takedown and he wasn't getting it, but he didn't let it get to him. He kept on shooting for that takedown. So it's obviously something, a precedent that he's tried to work on. So I wonder if that's going to be a bigger impact on the fight than I'm predicting. Sorry, but like I said, with Peak's movement, if he's able to frustrate Malik out of those takedowns, if it's a striking fest, I'm going to take Peak in this one.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Peak definitely seems to be the harder puncher. Let's talk about the next fight, Bruna Brasil versus Mann. What are your thoughts on that one, Ollie?
Well, these women, both of them are typically straw weights, so they're going to have to make the adjustments and fight at 125 pounds. However, you don't know how that's going to affect a fighter. You know, it could be a bad weight cut. They might feel a bit odd, you know, carrying that bit of extra weight in a way. However, you're looking at two flyweights that, you know, in size, very dispersed. Like Brazil, she's 5'6", 5'7", with a long reach. She's got a really good kickboxing background, really nice body kicks, spinning kicks to the head. She also has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu threat if she's taken down, but I don't think it is as good as what people would make it out to be. I think with someone like Mann who does have a wrestling style in any way, she could make good work of it. I don't know. It's a weird one to predict because they're so different in size and styles. But Mann, not Mann, but Mann, the fighter, she's had 3 years of experience. I think she might need a little bit more time because Brazil, she's more well-rounded. I think she'll point her on the feet, keep her at distance, and Mann doesn't like to strike for too long. I feel like she struggles to find success on the feet at times, and with someone like Brazil, she'll pick her off and she'll outpoint her. But I just don't think she'll have the knockout power to finish her off. And if you're not going to take people like Blader from last week because of maybe a boring decision victory, it's going to be even harder to impress Dana White now. You've got to pull something out the bag. You've got to get a finish, or you've got to be dominant. And I think if you're any of these ladies, you look at last week's fight and you try and take some inspiration off that and some motivation.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like this is a big opportunity for Marnik and, of course, for Bruna as well. But for Marnik, she goes into this bout undefeated and she faces a big risk. This is a big jump up, I would say, in competition on one of the biggest stages possible for her. Bruna, I'm very curious to see because we've seen Bruna get knocked out before. The 2 losses on her record are both via knockout. So when you look at it, Marnik may be able to do that early in the fight, but like Marnik is 5 foot and Bruna is 5'6". That's gonna be hard to make happen. You know what I mean? So I'm very curious to see what her game plan would be to counter that and how Bruna responds. Maybe Bruna, like you said, would like to get off to a slow start, perhaps tire out Marnik, take away her knockout power, take away her determination, and at that point, it's all about who wants it more. So it's going to be interesting to see that one. Talk about the final fight on the card: Brandon Lewis versus Daniel Marcos. Who do you got?
This one's a very weird one. Since I did my research, Brandon Lewis comes into this one looking to redeem his first Dana White Contender Series appearance, where he lost to Mo Miller last year. He'll have to take on a striker in Daniel Marcos. But the interesting thing about this, he's not competed in 2.5 years, so that's a lot of ring rust. It's not just a little bit. And to get a Contender Series shot 2.5 years out of the ring is a bit odd. So Dana White must have seen something from him. He must have been getting some inside training footage or something. So it's a weird one to predict. But Lewis, he trains at Death War. You know, he's trained with Alon Cruz, who also fought in the Contender Series. He also had some UFC fights, so he's obviously got an experienced camp to rely off. But both guys, looking at this one, they've not got great wrestling. Neither got great takedown defense. It's not really been tested by an elite wrestler. So I see this one being a big scrap. Wild punches, wild exchanges, in pockets of space. I think it's a lot of feints, hesitations. But, you know, when they're going to let fly, I think both are going to let fly at the same time. And you're just going to get an all-out slugfest. I just don't see there being a convincing winner or doing it by a convincing decision. I think it's either going to be a brawl or one of them.
It's going to be interesting, and I'd really wonder what Marcus's motivations are behind coming back. He's young, so that's what's working for him. But how many fighters are able to take a 3-year gap and come back successfully? You know what I mean? He's still 29. He can still focus and do it, right? But the thing is, will he be able to? And that's a question we will get our answers to when he takes on Brandon Lewis. I feel like this might be the fight where they're looking at, okay, Lewis needs to redeem himself. Let's get him someone who was hot when he was coming up in the regional scene back in the day. So they just put them together. Let's see whichever one comes out. Would it be a fairy tale ending for Daniel Marcus, or would Lewis redeem his loss in the Contender Series? And I do agree with a lot of what you said there as well. The ring rust part gets to a lot of people. So it's just about the conditioning Marcus. Right? There are so many questions in terms of how he will look. You can't really look back at what he did. Yeah, you have some idea, but like 2 years is a big time. We saw how Luke Rockhold returned, and yeah, he looked interesting. Let's put it at that. So let's see how Lewis and Marcus they brawl it out, or yeah, it all depends on what condition Marcus comes in. But it was
you
a
never
great
know.
chat, Ollie.
I was just going to say, you never know. He might
Yeah.
come in with some D1 level wrestling after 2.5 years out of the cage. He might turn out to be a completely different fighter since the last time we've seen him fight. And that's what's great about the Contender Series. I'm just hoping for a good fight.
Yeah, and you know we're gonna get a show with how this card is arranged. So I'm very excited for this, and had a great chat. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKickMMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.